I am 21 years old and I'm biracial. My mom is Mexican and my father is African American. For a very long time, I felt like I was always trying to discover myself and who I was in this world where a lot of the time I would always encounter people who were from one ethnicity or their mother and father were both from the same place, not two different ethnicities in one. So this video is for y'all out there who are biracial or perhaps multiracial and who have what feels like to be all these different identities in you. We've experienced a lot navigating life as, for me personally, somebody who is biracial in today's world. There are so many things that I've experienced that are just so difficult for me to share because I don't even know how to properly bring up these situations that have occurred to me. And that's why I wanted to film today's video, to talk about some of these things that I've experienced, some of these things that I've went through, uncomfortable situations by myself and some with my mother. So we're here to talk about it. And even if you are not biracial, or if you are just simply watching this video to just gain more information on what biracial, multiracial people go through, just sit and listen. It does not hurt, or nor is it a bad thing to watch something where you don't feel like you can apply to it, but I'm pretty sure you probably know somebody who is in your circle that can also apply to this. So share this video with them, or just listen and gain some insight into the world of being a biracial individual in today's society and growing up with being biracial, learning about yourself, learning about myself. So please sit, grab a coffee, grab a snack, and just tune in today's episode, where I am just going to be sharing my story, sharing some hurtful experiences that I've been through, and talking about more of my earlier childhood growing up being biracial. I am very comfortable. I just am sitting crisscross on my couch, and I wish I had a coffee so bad. I kid you not. I wish I could have a coffee, but I've been trying to do better by not having coffee before having a meal, and I have not eaten anything. So right now I'm on pause and I'm not consuming coffee until I eat. So after this YouTube video is filmed, your girl's gonna eat, your girl's gonna have her coffee. So don't be concerned about me. I still have my vitamin water. I am refreshing my body with this vitamin water. Don't worry at all. I'm 21 years old and I'm gonna turn 22 in November, and I have lived 21 years of my life, and I've identified as a biracial woman for a majority of the time. And that might seem like a weird thing to say, because you're like, well, you should have identified as a biracial woman all your life. But there were certain moments in my life where I felt like I could only identify with one side. So there were a lot of times where I felt like I was told that I could only be African American and not Mexican because I looked more African American. I have features that connect more with my African American side than my Mexican side. There are just so many complexities within all of that. So I have identified and told people that I am mixed at times and I'm biracial. And there are certain times where I just tell them I'm Black or that I'm African American and just leave it at that. So to be quite honest, it varies, but my whole life wasn't always, I introduced myself as being a biracial woman, especially when I was in elementary school. I had no clue that identity was such a big thing, and claiming that you were Mexican or Asian, or that you were Middle Eastern or Caribbean, etc. The list goes on. I had no clue until I got older, like how important identity was and stating where you are from and what you are mixed with or where your parents are from, how big of a deal that all is to some people, and how much weight there is on you when you're talking about these things to people. It is just tremendous. And I think the conversation comes up so much, which is why I say that it's just a lot of the time. Like, you talk about your identity, your ethnicity so much to people. And when you're applying to jobs and you're filling out applications, they even ask to know what you're mixed with. So this is something that has just always been lingering on my mind. When I was a kid, I had no clue. I was just Nicole. I didn't really care if I was Mexican and African American. Like, it made no difference to me. All I knew was that my mom was different than my dad, but they still loved each other. And that was that. I thought it was completely normal. I was not thinking about whether there were kids my age who had a mom that looked the same as my mom and a dad that looked the same as my dad. It was just a complete different situation. So growing up in elementary school was definitely an experience. I felt like it was a lot different for me than other kids my age who were not biracial. So their parents were both from the same place or somewhere, relatively close. It wasn't like they were completely, quote unquote, different or something, new, like me, for instance. My dad is African American and my dad is from Ohio. I don't know how far back my family tree goes and where they came from, but all I know is that from my dad's side is that we're African American. And my mother is from Mexico, and she came here at a very young age. So it was just so different for the two of them, and they both experienced such different lives and things. And their parents, for instance, raised them with two different, sets of values. Like, essentially, they are very much like the same in a lot of different ways, but there are unique differences between my parents that I can see and spot, which make my parents so different. But I think it's such a beautiful thing. I've always thought it was such a beautiful thing. But growing up, it was never something that I paid that much attention to. Nobody asked me where I was from. Everybody would just look at me, and quite honestly, they would assume that I was, just African American or Black, but a lot of the times my hair would give it away. My hair is very much like more of like a loose texture of curls, and it's not like so much like tight curls. The texture of my hair is different than somebody who is just fully African American or fully Black in a lot of cases. So I feel like sometimes people would always question, like, what is she really? What is she mixed with? But based off of physical looks, or when people would first look at me, I feel like that's what they would generally assume, is that I am just African American, nothing more. So I didn't really talk too much about my background, my ethnicity to other people during that time in my life because nobody really cared. We were just in elementary school having fun, getting to know each other, hanging out with friends, eating together. And that was that. It was never that complicated, nor did I feel like I paid attention to a lot of the things that happened. Like, in some cases, for instance, there were times when I was with my mom and people would just like stare uncomfortably. And this was something I paid attention to because I was just like, why are people looking so much at my mom and I when we're in the store or we're going out? My mom is a lot lighter than I am. And at that time, like, I still am relatively dark. My skin is dark. I have dark skin. But people would always stare. Like, they would always be looking at her and I. And as a little kid, these are little things that you notice. Like, you don't notice sometimes by the way people say things to you, but the eye contact, the looks that they would give, or I know there were several times where this would come up and it would be like, oh, is that your daughter? Like, really? Is that your daughter? Like, honey, why do you have to question if that's my mom? Like, come on now. Even if she wasn't like my full mom, or like if she wasn't biologically related to me, still, it's none of your business. It's none of your business. But I noticed that there were a lot of times where that would happen, especially when we were in settings like a Hispanic or Mexican grocery store, a lot of people would ask these questions to my mom, and my mom would always have to constantly say the same thing. Yes, she is my daughter, but like it really wasn't anybody's business to know to even begin with. But I think a lot of people had like curiosity, like, how is this Mexican woman with a girl that is darker than her? Like, is this really her daughter? I think a lot of people back then paid a lot of mind to things like that, especially if they saw something that was really different at that time. For me personally, I never really paid attention to this. I did not really care about identity or where people came from. I just treated everyone really the same. It was not a big deal to me if somebody was from a different place that I had no like knowledge of, or that I had no idea of what their culture was like or where they came from. There were little instances like that that made me feel uncomfortable as a little girl. I remember that I would just kind of always question myself. After people would question if my mom was my mom, I would start to question, like, is she my mom? Am I adopted? And like these might just be like really like silly things to like think about, because of course my parents had me. This is something that they told me from a very young age, you know, like they reiterated it to me even though I asked, because people asked my mom and I when we were out, you know, is she your daughter? I would go then to my parents and I would be like, am I adopted, or are you guys really my parents? And I think that's something that kind of hurt the most growing up, and that's something that I experienced and I paid attention to, those small little bitty tiny things. But because the world was questioning where I was from and the world had uncertainty, I think I started to develop an uncertainty within myself. And at a young age, I just wish that I wasn't both, because I felt like there was little representation for girls like me. I couldn't really find biracial, you know, girls or make friends with girls that were biracial, because that's not what I was around. I was around either Black, Hispanic, Mexican, Asian. Generally speaking, that's what I was around for the most part. Black, African American, Middle Eastern occasionally. I don't recall seeing too many girls or boys at that time that were mixed like I was, which is also probably what impacted me to feel the way that I felt with my identity. I was just so unsure of myself. I didn't really feel confident in who I was, because I just didn't feel like there was enough representation from biracial women or women who were Black and Mexican or African American and Mexican. So I just didn't really see this growing up, which is why I felt like it wasn't out there. So I just felt alone in what I was going through a lot of the time, until I probably reached middle school. And I remember like a really key point in my life was when my brother's girlfriend at the time, now that is his wife, but at the time they were dating, and she would show me YouTube videos of mixed girls that were doing their curly hair, you know? And quite honestly, our texture of hair from the girls that she was showing me, some of the YouTubers that she was showing me, our texture was just so similar. And I was questioning, how do I take care of my hair? My dad doesn't have experience with knowing how to handle hair as a guy, so I could not put my trust and faith that he would help, you know, me with my hair. My mom doesn't necessarily also have experience with dealing with Black hair, so she would just put my hair in ponytails at most. Like that's the most that my mom would do, and then she would just like kind of let it be, and then that was it. But I had to take matters into my own hands when I was in middle school and then early high school, because my hair was just becoming a mess. Like it was a big poof ball. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to tame it, conditioners, all these things. So my brother's girlfriend at the time, she showed me a lot of different people on YouTube filming videos talking about being biracial, you know, being mixed. And I just felt so happy that I could see other women on YouTube coming out talking about things like this. That was such a big moment in my life, and I felt so happy to then be biracial and to have my hair texture. A lot of the times I was like hating on it. I was like, why does my hair look like this? Nobody has hair like mine. How do I take care of it? And then I was watching YouTubers who were taking care of their hair that looked so similar to mine. And I just felt so happy that I could find these women that I just felt like I also like trusted in a way. And as I learned more about a lot of the YouTubers that are biracial or Mexican and African American, like I am, made me feel just so happy. It made my inner child feel so happy knowing that there was representation out there for me at that time so that I could learn how to manage like my hair. And my hair is and has been such a big part of my identity. For those who know me, my hair at one point was just like so big. I had a big afro, and it was like actually probably up to like my waist. I want to say my hair was really long at one point, and when it was straight, that is, it was really long. But when it wasn't straight, it was just straight poof. But yeah, I had such beautiful long hair. So at times, I feel like people would always know me for being that girl with like really nice, curly, poofy hair. And which is why I say my hair felt like it was my identity. And it was so connected to me. I didn't really realize how big of a difference it made, especially to other people. Like, people were always like, oh my God, I love your hair. Can I touch your hair? These things did make me feel uncomfortable because to me, it was just my hair. But to them, it was like I was this fascinating creature that they hadn't ever seen before, and that they needed to just touch my hair because they've never seen anything like this. Those moments like that made me feel uncomfortable. And I will tell you, a lot of the times when people ask things like that, I would always feel like I had to say yes. Like I had to, like I felt like I had no choice. Like, oh, essentially you're complimenting me, so let me act nicely in response to what you're telling me by letting you touch my hair. No one needed to touch my hair. And at the end of the day, now I realize that I could have said no if I wanted to. I didn't have to say yes to people touching my hair. It just kind of happened that when I was younger, I felt like I had to say yes, but I know now that I don't have to say yes, but that doesn't ever happen today. Little things like that occurred in my life where I was just like, why are people acting like this with me? Why are they telling me that I look so pretty for a Black girl? Things like this. Oh, is that your real hair? Little microaggressions that I experienced earlier on in my life. And at that time, I had no idea that they were microaggressions. I didn't know what a microaggression was until my freshman year of college. And that's when I learned about microaggressions. And then I looked back at my life and I was like, wait, I experienced a lot of those situations with people, and they made me feel so uncomfortable, and I didn't know how to respond. But that was simply just the truth. That was what I experienced. I didn't know how to respond in cases like that, nor were these things that I felt like I could share with my parents. My parents didn't know. Like, my parents were raising us as just normal kids, you know, like, what's the difference? And I feel like maybe any parent who has biracial kids won't necessarily feel like there's this big thing with like their identity, or maybe certain things to like let them know of when they reach a certain age, or certain things they might experience. So I had to learn about a lot of things on my own, and that is completely okay because I managed just fine and I learned a lot by myself. But I feel like at the same time, it would have been nice for my parents to have warned me about a lot of the things and situations I would experience, situations that made me feel so uncomfortable with people. And to this day, my parents don't fully know of all these situations because this is just not something that we talk about together. We don't talk about these types of experiences that I went through because they don't necessarily make me feel the happiest and all the best. When I was in elementary school, I was at my grandmother's house, and I was sitting there with one of my aunts, and she had asked me which side I liked better, if I liked my African American side better or if I liked my Mexican side better. And I was just baffled. I was stuck. I didn't know how to respond to a question like that, nor did I ever at that time get asked a question like that. Like, come on, what side do I like more? What kind of question is this? So at that time, I think I was starting to understand and realize that I was different. I wasn't like everyone else. I didn't look like everyone else. But I think coming from my own family member is where that hurt. And that was definitely a microaggression now that I look back at that moment. And she had no business asking me a question like that. The fact that she had the audacity to ask me that at such a young age shows a lot about who she is now. But that was just a moment that I will never forget. Disregard being how young I was, that was never a moment that I could go back and unforget. I then felt like I was so inclined to say that I liked my Mexican side more because my aunt from my mom's side is Mexican. So I was like, okay, I feel like I have to say that I like my Mexican side more because she's Mexican and I don't want to like offend her for saying that I like, both, or I like my African American side more. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, I remember saying like, oh, I like both, I'm both at one point. But then she was like, no, but like you have to only pick one. Like, which is the one that you like more? I'm like, what the hell? What kind of question is this? Well, I wasn't thinking that at that age, but now I'm like, what type of question is this really? It's not an appropriate question to ask a kid. But at that point, when she was like telling me that I had to pick one, I eventually felt like I had to just pick my Mexican side in order for her to stop questioning me and stop asking me these questions. And eventually it did stop. She didn't happen to ask me those questions anymore, but it made me feel so uncomfortable with her and also just within myself, because growing up, then I started to realize that a lot of people would ask the same question too. Which side are you more connected to? Which one are you really? No, you have to only pick one. And truth is I am two. I will always be two. I am biracial. I am both African American and I am Mexican. There's not one that I am more of. I am both equally. I know that personally. I don't really have like the strongest connection to my African American side because my dad doesn't really have so many traditions in comparison maybe to my mom. And that's just the way I grew up. But that doesn't mean that I'm less African American than I am Mexican because of that. I feel like I will always be both. And I can say that. And there should be no problem with me saying that I am both at any point in time. I will never, ever regret or never hold back from saying that I am both. And personally, that makes me as happy as I can be because my identity now means a lot to me. And I know that I am a representation and representing younger girls out there who feel the same way that I felt when I was younger. And I'm just ultimately hoping to make those biracial women out there feel like they have a platform for themselves and feel like they have somebody speaking on their behalf, because I wish I felt that way, quite honestly, when I was younger. Somebody who could have talked to me more about being biracial and what it would have been like as a woman who is biracial, navigating life. There are just so many interesting things. And as I got older, I feel like the most prevalent moments in which I would just be really surprised in where my race would come into play a lot of the times was when I was dating, which I'm not anymore. But when I was dating, I remember that for guys, me being mixed was such a big thing. What am I, this foreign type of creature? No. I felt like a foreign type of creature talking to a lot of these guys that I talked to before, especially since I was mixed, but it was such a topic that always came up and that men would always spend like 20 minutes, 10, 15 minutes talking about in our date. That's just how things would go. I could never get past that. That would be the first thing that guys would just recognize me for is, oh, you're mixed. Like, oh, that's different from what I usually like talk to. But it was never really questions about getting to know me and my background and what things I experience as being mixed in society. It was just more that men had fascination towards to what I was mixed with and me being mixed than getting to know what it actually consisted of, which was the hurtful part of it all. So I just felt like I was just treated so much like an object, and I wasn't really considered a lot of the time for who I was as a person. And even now, I still kind of sense that coming from even, I want to say, like, guys, now that I'm in a relationship, I'm taken, I don't have any interest in getting to know anybody. But I feel like even when I'm out, I see this, like, people's heads turn. People don't say, you know, like, oh, like, what's different about you? Or, oh, like, why do you look different? But people can express these types of things even by looking at you. And that's something that I will always get is the looks. People will always look around and they're just like kind of talking with their eyes just by looking at you up and down and just trying to identify what you are. Those things still happen to me too now, even though I'm in a relationship. But when I wasn't in a relationship, my race, my identity was such a big factor in it all because a lot of guys just were surprised and they felt like I was this foreign animal that they just had to get a hold of that nobody else had. So that's what my dating experience was like. And I just remember those moments so much because they disturbed me. Like, I think it's one thing to like the way that I look. And for example, now my partner loves the way that I look and he's just infatuated with me, right? But then there's like another side to that. Like, the bad side is just like having this oddly type of like obsession and like fetishization with Black women or a mixed woman, for instance, who's African American and Mexican, or she's mixed with something else. Like, men creepily fetishize over things like that. And they're like, oh, I have to be with a mixed girl. Like, I want this experience, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. But I felt very uncomfortable during moments like that. And I just always happened to run into guys who were like that. It was just always a fetish of, I want to be with a mixed girl. Or I haven't been with a mixed girl before. I haven't talked to one. I haven't dated. Like, little things like that. So I just felt like, well, I'm not here as your experiment. Or I'm not here for you to like do a round of tests. And then you realize that you don't want to be with me anymore because you just felt like it was something you felt like in the moment. And you have never talked to a mixed girl, and now I'm the first mixed girl that you want to talk to. That's not what I'm here for. That's not what I'm here for. But that's what I experienced a lot in the dating scene and realm of it all. So that was just a very eye-opening experience, to say the least. But now, being 21, and now knowing and standing so confidently in who I am, is so utterly beautiful. I look back at moments when I was younger and moments where I felt uncomfortable with these guys that I dated or certain experiences that I went through. And I just feel so proud that now I'm at a point in my life where I feel so utterly freaking confident in who I am. I'm willing to hurt somebody else's feelings, but not my own. Especially when it comes to my identity and who I am as a woman. I will not sacrifice anybody else's happiness or anybody else's enjoyment for the sake of not having mine. So that's a big thing that I've learned. I've also learned that I can be both. I can freaking be both, and it's nobody's business. I can be both, and I'm happy being both. I should never be having to pick one, because I am too. And that is such a beautiful thing. And I'm so happy that I am biracial and a woman of color and a woman who can speak Spanish. Puedo hablar los dos lenguajes, sí. Pero that is such a beautiful thing. I am so blessed to be both and to be able to represent and stand for other biracial women out there who could speak Spanish and also speak English, or who are African American and Mexican, or Latina, Latinx and African American, or Black. Like, it just varies so much. It's so hard for me to say, like, you know, people could be mixed with these two things, or I can represent for this community. But the list goes on. There are just so many people out there from different places. It has taken a while to get to this moment to feel happy with who I am and where I come from, and feeling confident with where I come from and telling that to people. But it's definitely baby steps. And I try to really only surround myself with people who are able to be understanding of that and who are open to me talking about both of my ethnicities, and being African American and Mexican. For me, it's not a big deal, but for some people, I feel like it's just difficult, because they're always like, well, you can't ever be both. You need to only be one. And I'm just like, that's impossible. That doesn't exist. But I just try my best to keep distance from people who think like that, because then I don't want to start feeling bad about myself and where I come from and the way I was just born. I was born into this. Like, I didn't necessarily get to choose. I'm going to be African American and Mexican. It just so happened to be that this is the way that I am. And I'm so proud regardless. And I wouldn't change it ever for the world, because the experiences that I have been through made me the woman that I am today. And I've learned a lot, and I'm hoping that I can share this information with other beautiful women out there, other men out there maybe who have been through similar experiences as me. You realize how important identity is to others, but also how important it is in your own life. How identity really plays a big part in it all. And when you are confident within who you are and where you come from, your roots, your culture, your community, that changes everything. You just stand, you walk with confidence. You don't walk looking down, you walk with your head up. If you enjoyed hearing me talk about the topic, and hopefully I could share some of my thoughts, it's so difficult to just talk about it all, but I've been through quite some stuff, and yes, it might seem unfortunate, especially as a little girl, having to see and sometimes hear a lot of these things that I was told or my mom was told have been disappointing, and it just never made me feel happy with myself when I was young, and just made me lose myself even more as I was trying to figure out who I was and if my identity was the identity that I was identifying with. So a lot of learning parts there, but nonetheless, whoever is out there watching this video, I want you to know that you can be happy with who you are, who you identify as. Be confident in that. Stand on that. Be firm in that. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise, because life is too short to be living it according to somebody else's way. Live your life however you want to. Do the things that you want to. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And I hope you learned a good amount of information based off of my experiences. That is what I will continue to be, regardless. Like, nobody can ever change my identity, and I don't want anybody to. So I'm going to stay confident in that. But if you enjoyed listening to me talk a little bit about my experiences as a biracial woman, please like and subscribe to my channel if you feel inclined to. But I will be back with another video soon talking about more deep, heavy topics. But if you enjoyed this video, please give it some love, share it, whatever you would like to do with it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all at another time. Bye for now.